regards to Syria. We've been reactive to the moment, to the crisis, without thinking about what is our strategy. If we're going to strike Syria, I don't think this ought to be a reflex action without a strategy. That's what this administration has to do, is figure out what is our long-term strategy in Syria going to be. I think that the responsibility of a president is to deal with the crises facing this country. And right now, what he does, by virtue of these tweets, is to generate crisis, to generate chaos. And rather than dealing with the problems that he's facing, which are significant, whether it's the economy or Syria or trade or all of these other issues, that's what he ought to be focusing on. To focus on this issue of Bob Mueller and the investigation and focus on tearing people apart, I think undermines his ability as president to be able to serve this country properly.
Okay, on that note, that was some of what former Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta told us last hour on Morning Joe. Earlier this morning, President Trump tweeted about Syria. Never said an attack on Syria would take place, could be very soon or not so soon at all. In any event, the United States, under my administration, has done a great job of ridding the region of ISIS. Where is our thank you, America? Joining us now, former NATO Supreme Allied Commander, now the Dean of the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University, retired four-star Navy Admiral James Stavridis. He's Chief International Security and Diplomacy Analyst for NBC News and MSNBC. Also with us, Professor and Director of the Center for Sustainable Development at Columbia University, Economist Dr. Jeffrey Sachs. Good to have you both with us. Admiral, I'd like you to respond to what you just heard from the former Director of the CIA and Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta. I'm so concerned at this point that people with the power to protect our democracy don't seem to be speaking up or doing what needs to be done if this president is not, as Panetta indicated, living up to his responsibility to lead this country.
I think this is a very significant statement from Leon Panetta, Mika, and you're right to point out he was director of the CIA. He was the Secretary of Defense. I worked for him directly for 2 years when I was the NATO commander. He is a brilliant boss. He was also the chief of staff to the president. He knows the White House. He knows the system. He was also in the House of Representatives. Hard to think of anybody with a greater span of experience. And he's precisely right. We have got ourselves upside down here on strategy and tactics. You want your tactics to be surprising. You want to surprise your opponents. You want your strategy to be stable. In this particular instance on Syria, we've got it backwards. We have the president who has massively telegraphed the strike that's coming, but our strategy, as Secretary Panetta says, is nowhere. We haven't connected the dots. And if we strike with a bunch of Tomahawk missiles and kind of wash our hands of it, we're defeating the purpose and we are undermining any chance, and the chances are slim to begin with, of progress in Syria.
So Jeffrey Sachs, chime in. This is very different than just a war between two countries. This is as convoluted as it gets and could get out of control. I don't think people might really conceptualize, maybe even not this president, how out of control this could escalate.
It's true, but I think we have to step back and not put this in partisan terms. This is a U.S. mistake that started 7 years ago. And I remember the day on your show when President Obama said, Assad must go. And I looked at you and Joe and I said, huh? How's he going to do that? Where's the policy for that?
Right. And
we know they sent in the CIA to overthrow Assad. The CIA and Saudi Arabia together in covert operations tried to overthrow Assad. It was a disaster. Eventually it brought in both ISIS as a splinter group to the jihadists that went in. It also brought in Russia. So we have been digging deeper and deeper and deeper. What we should do now is get out and not continue to throw missiles, not have a confrontation with Russia. 7 years has been a disaster under Obama continuing under Trump. This is what I would call the permanent state. This is the CIA, this is Pentagon, wanting to keep Iran and Russia out of Syria, but no way to do that. And so we have made a proxy war in Syria. It's killed 500,000 people, displaced 10 million, and I'll say predictably so, because I predicted it 7 years ago that there was no way to do this and that it would make a complete chaos. So what I would plead to President Trump is get out. Like his instinct told him, by the way.
Before, yeah.
That was his instinct. Right. But then all the establishment, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Pentagon, everybody said, no, no, that's irresponsible. But his instinct is right. Get out. We've done enough damage, 7 years. And now we really risk a confrontation with Russia that is extraordinarily dangerous, reckless.
Admiral Stavridis, President Trump has said, going back now several months, that we should get out of Syria. That was his advice to Barack Obama many years ago, get out of Syria. What are the consequences if you walk away right now from Syria without responding to a chemical attack from the regime there?
Yeah, I think there are two problems with Professor Sachs's comments, although I certainly feel that sense of Middle East fatigue that we all have. And, of course, it's not just Syria. It's Iraq. It's Afghanistan. There have been a whole series of things that have generated the kind of feeling that says, you know, let's just pull back. Let's get out of the world. Let's come back to the United States. I think there are two fundamental problems with that. One is the use of chemical weapons, I think, really does demand a response from the international community at a level of military strike. So I do support a strike here. And secondly, and I think Professor Sachs is correct to say this is a massive humanitarian disaster. I think the numbers are actually 600,000 dead and 14 million displaced. So I'm in complete agreement with him on the scale of this, but I would like to see the United States try and be part of the solution. And here, what I would do is look back to the Balkans in the 1990s, which looked somewhat like Syria of today, and there was eventually an international solution, and it included the U.S. and Russia working together. We got a long way to go to get there, but if we just step away from it, as attractive as that feels to us, I don't think it's the right decision, either for the country or for the international community.
I don't think it's attractive, but I think we have to understand how this happened. This happened because of us. These 600,000 are not just incidental. We started a war to overthrow a regime. It was covert. It was Timber Sycamore. People can look it up, the CIA operation, together with Saudi Arabia. Still it's shrouded in secrecy, which is part of the problem in our country. A major war effort, shrouded in secrecy, never debated by Congress, never explained to the American people, signed by President Obama, never explained. And this created chaos. And so just throwing more missiles in right now is not a response.
My only concern...
We need to go, it's, by the way, not to walk away, to go to the UN Security Council, as the Admiral says, to agree with Russia on a strategy for ending the fight. But ending the fight means that we stop trying to overthrow a government, that we stop trying to support rebels who are committed to overthrowing the government. That is where this war continues, because we, to this day, back rebels that are trying to overthrow a government contrary to international law, contrary to the UN Charter, contrary to common sense, contrary to practical path. We can't do it. And it's just creating ongoing crisis to the extent of facing an imminent confrontation with Russia.
So I think this is an important conversation to have in terms of figure out what our strategy and our policies should be. My biggest concern, though, is that this president isn't thinking about this at all.
I agree with that.
That this is the last thing on his mind, and that anything he tweets about it fits the pattern of trying to distract and detract. And Admiral Stavridis, I hate to go here, but I think it's at a point where we really have to think about Madeleine Albright's book, Fascism, A Warning to the United States of America. When you have a president who calls the special counsel's probe a witch hunt, And he calls the raid on his attorney's home and office a break-in and an attack on America, like an act of war. And as of last night, was promoting Hannity, which was about the Mueller crime family. And then this morning is tweeting about Syria. This does not sound like somebody who is going to keep America safe, let alone make it great again.
You know, I agree, Mika, and, you know, there's a major international component to this problem as well. Even as we are polarized here in the United States by all that you have described, and we feel this sense of our society being kind of rendered, our international friends, partners, and allies are looking at these distractions and losing their confidence in our ability to bring coalitions together, to go to the United Nations coherently and try and find a real resolution for Syria, to take actions around the world. And so I worry about it, not only your point, an excellent one about how it feels inside the United States, but also how it looks from the outside.
Oh, we're a disgrace, a humiliation. I will say it. Admiral James Stavridis, thank you very much. Jeffrey Sachs, thank you as well. And you can watch our full interview with Leon Panetta online at joe.msnbc.com. Up next, what's better than flying a flag to publicly announce that you're at the office? How about redesigning a souvenir coin to feature more of you, yourself, and you? Ryan Zinke has reportedly been one-upped by Scott Pruitt. That's next on Morning Joe.